Dan Petroski of Massican. Man, it is such an honor to have you here today on the Mr. Wine Guy podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it, Michael. This is a lot of fun to connect this morning. Harvest is officially in the barn for Massacans. I'm just getting an opportunity to take a breather and catch up with you and while I'm drinking my coffee.
There you go, man. I just wanted to let you know I always like to jump out and do a quick plug on the people that I have on the show. Anytime I have somebody on the show, I'm always honored. I'm always privileged. But I'm going to be completely honest with you, man. When I reached out to you, no disrespect to the people that I also reach out to aside from you, but when I reached out to you, I crossed my finger behind my back and I was just like, this is a shot in the dark. You are a big inspiration to me, and I know a lot of people. But one of the things that's so fascinating about you, aside from the fact that you make these incredible Italian varietal driven wines in California with your personal brand Massican, but you are a guy that paves the way. You are a guy that goes after your dreams. You took this sabbatical, which we'll talk about, when you went over to Italy and left a lot of things to the back. And you were really successful in one thing, but you wanted to be successful and great at another. And it was because of your passion and your drive. And I think at the end of the day, when people that are listening to the show today, I hope that they can take away from not just the fact that you're an incredible winemaker and that you're really good at what you do, but you're also somebody that gives people permission to step outside, think outside the box, and go after their dreams. And so luckily you hit me back up. It didn't take you long. I was shocked. It was like 20 minutes. I thought I got an auto reply. I'm like, wait, he really hit me back up. So I'm very happy to have you on the show, man. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Michael. That was very good to say. I hope I don't debunk or let your listeners down with the conversation we'll have today. But I really just I love the wine industry because it gives us these opportunities to connect over a glass of wine, over something from the earth that's been fermented, that's been gives us all a little bit of loosens up our tongue a little bit and allows us to talk freely. And it's been really just a joy and a pleasure to have this opportunity to do what I do and to chat with you today.
It's cool too because you're new in the industry. It's weird. You're not really new in the industry, but man, you've taken off in such a way. You've done so many different things. I'm going to talk with you about a lot today. I'm going to go all the way from wine to your magazine to your NFT project. You've really figured out ways to try to tap into different parts of the industry. You're on most, if not all, the social media platforms. So you're really connecting with the everyday consumer today who's always doing things online and stuff like that. But I want to go back and start at the beginning. I want to start when you were at Columbia University, you were playing football, you were studying history. Wine was not even in the question. In fact, I think it wasn't until you were like 25 that you actually started drinking wine. And I got to thinking, I was actually 26, 27, something around there when I started drinking wine. So we had a little bit of a correlation. Sometimes these things happen later for some than others. But when you were going to school at Columbia, what were your career goals? What were your ambitions at the time, knowing that wine wasn't in the forefront?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I went to high school in Manhattan, and I went to Columbia because I was like in high school. I was like, I'm going to go work on Wall Street. And why wouldn't a Wall Street firm hire a kid who went to college in Manhattan? I had
Mhm.
no idea that Columbia was an Ivy League school. I got recruited there to play football, which I did. And I felt like a bit of a fish out of water there with regards to academics. It was a level of peers that were just so intelligent. And I said, so I put my head down and played football and did my thing. And tried to study and do the best I could, and I did, and I'm very proud of my degree there. And it was in history, and I ended up finding my place. I did a thesis on Charles Dickens when I was there, and social reform. And but it was funny that the full circle. I went to Columbia to play football, and Columbia has a notorious losing streak, and they were always the worst team in the league. And you go in as a freshman with high hopes and ambitions, and you want to win every game, and you want to prove to the world your worth. And our first game as freshmen, we lost to Harvard, and we all went to the local Chinese restaurant, which was awesome because you can get your beef and broccoli, chicken and rice, and unlimited white wine for $8. And so we all were just so bummed out. I got so drunk that night on white wine it was my tequila moment, and I never wanted to drink white wine again. Every time I smelled white wine, I got nauseous. So that's why I never really drank wine again until I was like 25, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. And then today, out of the 1,800 wineries in Napa County, Massican is the only white wine winery. That's a funny full circle. But yeah, I graduated and I was fortunate enough to go from football to working at Sports Illustrated. That was a dream job come true. I worked on their websites back in 1996, 97, 98. Switched over to Time Magazine, and then I really caught the bug because at time we were on the publishing side, and it was still the glory days of Mad Men. It was still really high travel and expense budgets, still entertaining a lot of clients. Advertising was really important. Subscription models and magazines in the late
Mhm.
90s, early 2000s were still flying high. I worked at Time Inc. and People Magazine, In Style, Real Simple. These magazines were just going from 0 to 60 on readers and subscribers. So I just got caught up in the whole experience of New York City high life with a credit card that my company was allowing me to entertain. And
Yeah.
I used that opportunity to really dig into the wine scene. You can go to a restaurant and you know what a steak is, but it's really hard to look at the right side of the menu and see 1,000 wines next to you. And you don't know where they're from, what they mean, why they cost so much money. So I really did took that opportunity to read more about wine than drink it, honestly.
Mhm.
And that's when I picked up the first Robert Parker Wine Bible. I picked up Jay McInerney's book. I subscribed to the Wine Spectator. This is all early 2000s. And that's when I caught the wine bug through education. And then I saw how wildly aspirational it was,
Mhm.
in the sense of these great stories of these great families and generational change over a generation with a commitment and a responsibility to the land and into a story and to a product that they created. I just thought they were amazing stories to tell while sitting at dinner with a date or a partner
Mhm.
or a client or a colleague. And it just really elevated the experience for me. And I just got caught up in the whole thing. And here I am today.
Dude, you mentioned something earlier, and I think it's important to point out. You said that you felt like you were a fish out of water. Do you feel like at that time, looking back, you were just not where you were supposed to be and you didn't even realize it?
I think it's a good observation. I agree with that statement, and I also want to add to it a little bit. Fish out of water. I was a little nervous about school again, being around a bunch of smart people. I wanted to study art history. Art is like my one true passion. I love everything about the art scene in New York and globally, from museums to galleries, etc. And artists, just like winemakers, have these wonderful backstories and inspiration. Art was my thing, but I felt like, oh, I was a football player. I couldn't be an art history major. So I just dropped the art and became a history major. But I never stopped pursuing art and my love of art. And it's as you grow older and more confident with your personal self and your self worth, that you can do and feel and be whoever you want to be, and not
Mhm.
worry about what other people think. But at the same time, I was very fortunate that the Columbia experience was for me was all about teamwork, and it was all about understanding how to move a group of people together and how to bring a group of people together, whether it be the 11 people on the field, the 45 people on the sideline, or the 5,000 people in the stands. How to bring them together, have a good time, and to be passionate about one thing. And
Mhm.
that was really important to me as I started thinking about how you build universes around and brands and communities around products and stuff. And I had the good fortune of being curious when I graduated school and I started working at Time Inc. and had the opportunity to work in 4 different departments over 10 years. And when I started to chat with the generation behind me and become a mentor to some folks, I always said, in your 20s, you should have 4 different jobs every 2 years, because you don't know what the fuck you want. Like I didn't know what I wanted in college. I didn't know what I wanted as a 20 something. And I just wanted to expose myself to different operations, different aspects. And what that gave me was it gave me this roadmap of being able to dissect a problem or dissect a business. And that helped me build Masakan
Mhm.
because I knew how to editorially create a time make. I knew how to be a marketer, a consumer marketer, and speak to customers. I knew how to speak to sponsorship and advertising and marketing sales. I knew how to logistically handle a product and build a product and deal with vendors because I worked in 4 different departments to allow me to do that. And I also had the finance side of the degree as well.
Mhm.
And that really inform the pathways, which seemed four different pathways in my 20s, really helped me come together in my 30s to create, to go into a business like wine, to be a creator, be a winemaker. Someone asked me yesterday in this transition to my partnership with Gallo, and they said, "What are you?" Because
Hmm.
you seem to do fucking everything. Are you a winemaker? And I said, I'm a content creator. I know that sounds very overused in today's social media space, but I love to create content around this idea called Massican. And there's a product base that that brings people together around the table called Massican. But the stories that are told and the stories of how you got there and the memories that are made and the memories that you recall and the romanticism, nostalgia, all those things around an experience are what drive me to build Massican as what I want to be. I jokingly, competitively say greatest white wine in California, but at the same time, I want it to be the greatest white wine or the best white wine or the white wine that you feel most comfortable with for a myriad of reasons.
Hmm.
And some of those reasons are because you had a great honeymoon in Italy or somewhere in the south of France and you love the white wine you drank, or you just fell in love over a bottle at a restaurant on a first date, or you just really enjoy that it's light and bright and fresh and airy and it's not high in alcohol and you can have a glass or two, put it in your refrigerator, and then the next night have a glass or two, and the next night have a glass or two till the bottle is gone. Like
Hmm.
those are, I just want people to come together in around this idea of Masakan. And I think all the paths I've taken helped me inform that decision. But it's a long journey. It's
Totally, man.
not something anyone can expect of themselves to do overnight. And patience is truly key when it comes to personal growth and career growth, in my opinion. And I think a lot of us, including myself, don't have a lot of patience when it
Dude,
comes to career growth.
I think that you sparked something in my mind. You're more or less trying to tangibly grab the memories and the experiences of wine and retell those stories. I think in the wine industry, there's a lot of these things that are happening, get-togethers, anniversaries, vintages, places, family, things like that. But you literally want to capture them in the moment. It's almost like you want to grab them tangibly and you want to tell that story. You're very much an artist at the end of the day, content creation. I don't think it's necessarily something that you should look at and say, oh, that's just fun social media stuff. That's just dancing on TikTok. No, you're actually literally telling your stories in a way that I think a lot of people are missing out on. And that's one of the things that I think makes you so far ahead, which is cool. And I want to jump forward a little bit, but not too much before we talk a little bit about time and when you worked in story and publishing. But you didn't actually go to school for winemaking. And I think it's interesting because your on the job training has literally put you in the position that you are today. I'm a big believer in on the job training. I've never been one to want to go to school. I hate the thought of sitting in a class and learning material that they just shove in front of me and I'm trying to get a credit or I'm trying to get some sort of a grade. I'm a very methodical person when it comes to learning things specifically for a job. Do you think that's been a huge advantage for you looking back on the last 20 years at the success that you've had in the wine industry?
Oh, for sure. And it comes down to, it goes all the way back to college football and repetition, right? The one thing about athletics, which is so amazing, is if you have the good fortune of playing at any level, is you hate it when you're doing it, but the repetition is key. Repetition, it's not, we always say practice makes perfect, but we take it one step further, like a Michael Jordan in the world would say, perfect practice makes perfect. So
Totally.
repetition of doing something over and over again has always been important to me, because I agree with you. I'm not an academic in any way, shape, or form. And the beauty of the wine industry and harvest is that when I was working in Dumal and then Larkmead, like you ferment a red wine grape for 21 days and you do maybe two or three pump overs a day. That's 75 potential interactions, see potential interactions with a singular ferment. Now you have 30 of those ferments. So now you have 60 times 30 repetitions and to experience it, as long as you have the palate memory, the mental memory, the insight, the note taking, the ability to absorb and educate yourself on how things are moving, it helps inform your future decisions and helps you be a better decision maker in the future. And that's all just comes down to repetition. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. On the job training for me is something I've done in every position. I did go and get my MBA, and I hated being in the classroom.
Yeah.
And it was really cool for me to learn and sit and hang out with my friends at lunch in the class and to keep a core group of us together for as many years as we have been away out of school. And I learned more about derivatives from my buddy who worked on Wall Street than we did in the finance class, because I had no idea how to read a book and understand derivatives. I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. And then someone sits at lunch and explains it to me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it now. So I hear you with it. It's like academics has never been my strong suit.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. I don't want to talk too much about your time with Time and Sports Illustrated. I think it's pretty cool. I don't think it's something that should not be at least mentioned. You had a lot of success with that. You've always been fascinated with story and literature. But I want to fast forward to 2005. So I forget where I heard this, but you were talking in an interview and you said you took this sabbatical and you left behind all of these things that you were doing. You had a decade in magazine and literature, and you went to Sicily to work in the wine industry. So talk with me about what inspired you to do that. What inspired you to step away from that to pursue something different? I know you started to get curious with wine thanks to the company card and things like that, but also what inspired you to go to Italy and in particular work at the vineyard that you worked at?
So that was a pivotal moment in my career in publishing. I had an opportunity to take another job in publishing at the Wall Street Journal, which I had to really think about if I was going to leave Time Inc., which I loved dearly. I knew what my path was at Time Inc. to continue to be successful. So I had to make, there was a fork in the road for me.
Mhm.
One of my business school colleagues, after we graduated, a group of us went and visited him in Sicily, where he grew up, and we did a nice 7 to 10 day vacation in Sicily, and we all fell in love with the Italian hospitality, like everyone does. And I came back to the States and my job, and a couple months later, when I had this fork in the road about changing jobs, I called my friend and said, "Hey, remember when we visited your friend's family's winery? And what if I took my sabbatical? Time Inc. offers a 15-year sabbatical. If you're with the company for 15 years, they offer you a year or 6 months paid." And I said, what if I just take that sabbatical right now and go? I have nothing holding me back. I don't have children. I have a small apartment I could sell to finance a trip. I'm not in a relationship that's meaningful that I'm going to break up if I choose to leave for a year.
Yeah.
So I had the freedom to be able, in that time of my life, to be able to make a decision that was life changing. And that I think was the key point. And I also had a conversation with my mother, and she was so excited about her working for the next until she was 70 and I was 32 at the time. And I was like, holy shit, I'm going to work another 40 years of my
Yeah.
life. I said, I gotta take off. I didn't do backpack. I didn't do a semester abroad. I didn't backpack through Europe. I went straight from the grind of 8 years of football to working 10-hour days and living my life in New York City, never getting great vacations and great experiences, but not having this true livable sabbatical moment. And Sicily was that. And then I just so happened to be able to get that job with Valle Delicate, and it wasn't really a job. It was more of a kind of a stage where I did some work in the vineyards for 10 months and throughout the harvest, and spent time with the owners of the vineyards and learned about the land and learned about the viticulture and farming practices and why and how it was important as a family generational business, and also learned how to appreciate wine. And then I
Mhm.
brought that back to America thinking I was just going to go take a lot of my historical corporate work and put the Italian wine on top of it and see if there was some kind of fanciful brand ambassador job for an Italian winery in America, or work with a distribution import company to bring Italian wines into America. And it was 2006, and I had no idea how to find that job because it
Yeah.
wasn't in my. I came in to the industry from the vineyard, not from the corporate experience, not from a sales and marketing experience. So it really hard for me to in 2006 to even find the right people to talk to. And that's how I extended my wine education and stage in California at Dumal with Andy Smith, who eventually hired me at Larkmead in the cellar, and where I became the winemaker.
Yeah, that's cool. There was a correlation to that. And you were a winemaker at Larkmead, which is a huge, we're talking back to the 1800s, a very historic, huge Cabernet house. And when you think about it, you were the winemaker at Larkmead in '07. So you've only been doing this for a couple of years, but obviously you were really good at it and they trusted you and they knew that you were going to be successful. What was it about going from Sicily to Dumas? You got linked up with Andy Smith, and I know the correlation to Larkmead, but how did you find yourself at Dumas? And was it at that point that you were like, this is literally what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life?
No, not at all. I just thought it was a stopgap to get back to New York City. It was an opportunity for me to meet people in the wine industry and then hopefully transition those conversations to, hey, I know something about this product that I'm selling because I worked in a vineyard and I worked in the cellar for a harvest. So I had a minimal experience of crushing grapes. Minimal, very minimal, obviously. It wasn't
Right.
a lot of time. And so I wanted to understand that. It was like I always looked at the publishing aspect of business. I wrote for Sports Illustrated at times. Like I sold a magazine, I sold advertising. I knew how all the pieces came together, right? So my wine experience was learning about the product and then taking my skill sets that I learned in corporate to the next level. So I had no interest in being a winemaker. I had no interest in staying in the cellar, making wine, crushing grapes, doing what I'm doing today. It wasn't until honestly until October 31st, I remember because obviously it's Halloween,
Yeah.
that Andy Smith said, "I want to hire you," and I was like, "To do what?" It's like I don't know what do you want me to do? And he said, "I want you to be the cellar master at Larkmead, which is the entry level position at the winery." And I was like, "Okay." And that was it. And we still had to finish harvest, and we had another follow up conversation. I said, "Yeah, let's do it." He said it would probably start around December 1, but officially in January '07. So yeah, I transitioned from Dumal to Larkmead in December, and then January full time, and then it was just getting it was hands on work. And Andy was my boss and mentor, and he's the only person there other than me. So he would come, and Cabernet is great because Cabernet is not something you need to touch every day
Hmm.
when in the winemaking process. So it's really about managing the facility and becoming a facility manager, and then a winemaker in the manufacturing sense of the way when you had to rack and blend and top and sulfur, do the
Hmm.
things to maintain the wine on a monthly basis. And those are all repetition things. So again, it goes back to this idea that you do it over and over again. When you taste, and I had a little notebook and I would taste wines out of barrel because really it was a quiet day and there's nothing pressing on the logistics side of the business to do. So I was just going to taste to teach myself about the different lots, about the different varieties and the lots within the varieties.
Hmm.
And that gave me a really good opportunity to understand how these wines were being made and why this particular vineyard tasted like this particular vineyard and the style that Andy had, why it informed the vineyard presence and so forth and so on, which then led me to my own creative act, which is how I saw the vineyard and what I wanted the vineyard to be. So it was great to work under Andy for those many years
Yeah.
and then he parted and I had full reign and a blessing by the ownership to just make great wines. And that was at the same time I had started Massican as a side hustle. Never wanted that to be anything big. I wanted it just to be really cool brand that offered me diversity of knowledge and making a bunch of different white grapes, making a bunch of different red grapes, and hopefully one informing the other. I used to always say that making Massican was like the preseason to really making wine at Larkmead because at white wine grapes are harvested in August and early September, and then red wine grapes are mid September into October. So I had
Hmm.
this long extended harvest, but I could see the vintage before. If I wasn't making as much, wasn't traveling around seeing as many vineyards develop, I would only be stuck in my little snow globe on Larkmead Lane looking
Yeah.
at my one Larkmead vineyard. So I had real exposure to more parts of the valley and how things were developing on the vine. So that was super informative as well for me.
Dan, do you think that when you were working at Larkmead and I think 2009, Massican was born, did you think that there was an advantage in one aspect, you're making these wines that are totally different than Massican? Did that help you in any way as a winemaker, or did it just make you a better winemaker in general? What was there a correlation to the skill set that was needed to be better at Massican because of Larkmead?
No, I think there's a couple of things it taught me. One was I learned how important aromatics and texture were to me as a winemaker. I want my wines to be, I want people to be drawn into the wines because they aromatically smell delicious. And then I want them to be texturally engaged with the wine on their palate. And so if you think about the wines when I was leaving Larkmead and in the last 5 years of my career there, and how Massican has always been developed. Like Massican's a fresh, bright, what we would say a highly acidic wine,
Totally.
and then and Larkmead would be a red, fruited, bigger, bolder, very tannic wine. And
Mhm.
so tannin and acid act as the same thing on the palate. They give you the drive to want to have a second sip or take a bite of food to satiate the saliva build that comes with acid and tannin. So I used those two kind of philosophies of what kind of style of wines I wanted to make to inform each other and back and forth, and also to push the envelope on what consumers and also critics, because obviously when you're selling $100 plus bottles of Napa Valley Cabernet, it's a very competitive landscape, and you need to have critics on your side to help support third party validation of what you're doing. So it was really cool for me to get in front of a lot of critics and get validation, but also have consumer validation as well, especially through the Larkmead tasting room and seeing the style of wine that was slightly atypical to a lot of the wines a tourist would taste if they came into a 3 or 4 day Napa Valley visit.
Yeah, totally.
Napa Valley is, the wines are full of sunshine and deliciousness. And then you get to up to Calistoga and Larkmead, the wines are very rugged. And I used to say that walking in Larkmead's vineyard at 11 a.m. is pretty savage. It's hot, it's dusty, it's
Mhm.
rocky. It's not a place where you think you're going to make elegant supple wines. You can, but that's not the vineyard to me. So I always thought I was like, I want to make wines that are crunchy and rugged and savage and like that reflect the place.
Yeah.
And that's where I took them over time. And the same thing with Massican and the white wine. So there was like this ping pong match. Massican, I kept pushing the freshness quotient because I tell everybody, drink Jamina and it's your salt and your lemon that you would put on your fish. You don't
Yeah.
need to, it's the garnish, it's the condiment that Richard Betts always says, wine's a condiment. And it's the balance, it's the offset. And those are the things. So I look at it, I've always looked at the winemaking that way. It's like, how is it going to be consumed on the table? And when you're thinking of a red wine like a Cabernet, you're thinking 4 or 5 years from now. When you're making that harvest decision and the decision to ferment for 21 days and how you're going to age it and when you're going to bottle it and when you're going to release it, you're thinking 5 years out, right? When someone's going to consume it at their table. The beauty of white wine is you think 6 months out, not 5 years.
Mhm.
You think because it's going to be bottled and put right on the table, and how people are going to consume it. It can inform you very quickly on what you need to think about. And every year I make Massican and I say I'm going to make softer, richer wines, a little bit more alcohol, lower the acidity. And every year I do the opposite. I make more aggressive, more acidic wines because the consuming marketplace is actually welcoming of it, where I thought they'd be afraid of it.
Yeah.
And so I've had this really good history in 15 years in Napa Valley of bucking the stylistic trends a little bit and succeeding and finding a lot of other people who want to drink those wines and critics who want to celebrate those wines. So I took a risk and I took a bet and it paid off.
Yeah. So Massican was born in 2009. Talk a little bit about the name, what inspired Massican. Massican, in my opinion, is an homage to your time that you spent in Italy. These are California made, Italian varietal driven wines. Half your portfolio represents California. You have 100% Hyde Chardonnay, you have your Sauv Blanc, but you have some other wines that are pretty much blends of Italian varietals. And I think you're trying to tell this incredible old world, food driven, terroir driven story about Italy, but you're telling that story with your wines in California. So, talk about the name, but also you've elaborated on it a little bit. But of course, terroir means everything to you. And when people drink your wines, are you very much hoping that they are pairing your wines with food? Is that going to be the best possible expression? Or do you want people to just drink it however they want to drink it and you're happy either way?
First off, I think you summed up Masakan perfectly. I don't need to reiterate what you just said about why Masakan is what Masakan is.
Yeah,
You
man.
nailed it. I
Yeah.
did. I did. I was in when I started Masakan. It really started as a business plan that I shared with my business school friends, and it was actually for a red wine. And when you look at a red wine business plan, because as I said earlier, it takes up to 4 to 5 years to get Cabernet into market and start returning revenue on your expense and your capital investment. So everyone's like, this is a really bad business. So I converted it over to a white wine business. And then it was also at the time in my life when I was very sentimental for my time living in Italy and feeling that the Napa Valley climate and the Napa Valley terroir was very Mediterranean, but we weren't drinking Mediterranean style wines. We weren't making Mediterranean style wines. So I was at that nostalgic moment in my career and my personal life in Napa. And then the business side of it was the business plan. And then when I converted it over to a white wine business plan, people were like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And then one of my colleagues from Sicily was like, let's make wine. So that's when we started the Massican project in the first vintage in '09. It pays homage to my family that lived outside of Naples in the Massican Hill, near the Massican Hills, which is Monte Massico in southern Italy. That's my mother's side. I named one of my wines, my flagship wine, after my mother because of her grandparents in the Massican Hills and their history in Campania. And it was just that was the family connection. So then it was the nostalgic romantic connection of what do you drink when you're in Sicily or the Amalfi Coast and you're on vacation or on honeymoon, or if you're in Naples and or even in some other part of the Mediterranean in Greece and France, Spain, Portugal. What do you drink most times of the year? Mediterranean climate. It's hot, it's warm, breezy nights, and you're drinking white wine, and it's
Mhm.
fresh, and it allows you're drinking wine at lunch, you're drinking wine at dinner, and white wine and slightly lower alcohol and a little bit fresher and brighter, and it pairs well, and you feel good after drinking. You feel uplifted after drinking a glass. So that was the impetus in '09 for me was yes, the business plan makes sense. B, this is the lifestyle I want to live in a community in a climate that is very Mediterranean, and yeah, it just I was fortunate. It was the right time, the right place. There was a movement happening where I wasn't the only one thinking that way. A lot of my peers in my same category of winemakers, they were thinking that way. And so we had this little movement that John Bonet at the San Francisco Chronicle called the New California Wine Movement. Because it was just basically a reflection of everything old is new again. It was a
Yeah.
reflection of going back to when the first Spanish settlers and German and French and Italian settlers all came to California to make wine in the 1800s. And how they consumed wine pre-prohibition and post-prohibition as these table products. Remember, when we import wines and you see an imported wine, it comes across as a table wine. And that concept has always been, it's been resurrected in California as wine is part of the table. And I think the New California wine movement has been that. Let's go backwards to go forwards and let's look at the historical past, the cultural past. Let's look at the grapes of the past. And can it help us inform what we want to drink and how we want to drink in the future? And that's what I thought the New California wine movement did really well. And at
Mhm.
the same time, there's the Napa Valley wine movement, which is people joke calling it big flavor and all that, and like that Bob Parker concepts and luxury and finesse and gilded castles and all the things that want you to. There's many tiers of consumption at all
Yeah.
products, not just in wine. Every product can start at $1 and go to $1,000. Everything in your home. So wine's no different. It's different, I think, in the food and beverage space. I don't think there's a lot of products in food that go from $1 to $1,000. Very rare, but wine does it really well.
Yeah.
Wine scales price ranges and aspiration really well.
You actually have what you call Massican magazine. And this is one of the things that you do. You do it different, but it's such an important way for you to help storytell. And I know storytelling is big for you, but Massican magazine is a way for you to share stories about architecture, art, travel, fashion, food and wine, all these different things. In fact, side note, I think you either have or you're still writing a cookbook. So I know how much food means to you. But was your time that you spent time working in publishing, was that kind of the thing that inspired you to step in and put together Massican magazine to help tell this tangible story? Like I was telling you earlier, I think you're trying to reach and grab these moments and you're trying to put them in front of people and say, look, you may have had this amazing time drinking this wine that one night and it was this vintage, but this particular moment you can have now captured, and that would be something that you would read about in your magazine. So would you say that was the inspiration behind that, or are you just naturally wanting to do these kinds of things to help tell those tangible stories about wine?
It actually goes before my publishing career. It goes to like my upbringing. I wasn't a kid who read books. I read magazines. We grew up in Brooklyn. We weren't a wealthy family. We didn't travel overseas or anything. So I would subscribe to like Condé Nast Traveler like, when I was 16, 17 years old. And I would
Yeah.
read, all these publications, GQs and the Esquires of the world. And they were through the pages of these magazines were inspirational and aspirational. And they were transportational in the sense that if I opened up a spread and there was a canopy of trees and a bunch of Europeans sitting under it, and they're all good looking, and the food looked great, and the wine was on the table. I wanted to insert myself in that situation. There's
Hmm.
no different than reading a book. That's how when we read a book, we feel like we are a character on the wall, and or what we would say in TikTok, a non-player character in the gaming space today. But that was that, and so to go work at a publishing company was insane. It was like, oh my god, I'm working at the places where that inspire me, and then I get all these
Yeah.
magazines and the entire company, and I get to thumb through magazines and read magazines every week, and that was important to me. You said something earlier I want to touch on, which is relevant to this moment. Is yes, I don't have a physical place. Masakan doesn't exist physically, right? There's no winery, there's no vineyard. I have contracts and relationships with farmers. I have contracts and relationships with wineries to make the wine. So there's nothing that Masakan you can come to see and then like experience Masakan and have it touch you. So
Mhm.
I've used the stories to trigger emotions because you have more memories than experiences, right? Like your
Right.
memories your memories are forged on experiences, but you'll have so many more wine drinking memories than you'll have of visiting a winery in Napa Valley. You've had one
Hmm.
experience of visiting a winery in Napa Valley, potentially, maybe you had 10, but you've had dozens of experiences drinking wine. So I try to trigger some of those experiences in one of your best moments. And where do you want to trigger that experience or where do you want to transport yourself? So the magazine was something where it's like, where do you want to have a glass of wine? Do you want to have a glass of wine at an art gallery on a Thursday night or at a museum or at a movie theater or on your couch watching a movie, on your couch reading a book? Do you want to have wine while you're cooking? Do you want to have wine at a fancy restaurant in Europe or New York or wherever? And so it's like, where do you want to have a glass of wine? Where do you want to have an experience? And then can Masakan be that vehicle to take you there? And maybe it's just taking you there in your head and in your mind and your memories and your aspirations and your inspirations. And that's where I think I had to learn marketing for Masakan because I didn't own anything. It's easy to
Right.
market something when you have a beautiful winery for someone to visit. You don't have to say anything. They walk in and they're transported to this incredible, beautiful place,
Hmm.
and that'll stick with them. Where so Moscan has to create that memory, and so the memory I try to create is what are the best Italian films you should be watching on a Friday night and drinking a glass of Moscan? What are the best Italian recipes you should be cooking and eating with your partner at home? What are the best Italian restaurants? Where should you go in Rome and visit? Where should you drink refreshing Mediterranean white wine? Should it be the Amalfi Coast or should it be Sicily or somewhere else in the Mediterranean? Like, so I created content to drive people's desire to mostly to travel. And this is the thing people always ask, oh, well, who's your demographic profile? I'm like, demographic from an age perspective, everybody wants to travel.
Yeah.
You can be 65 or 25. You both want to go to fucking Rome. I don't need to limit Masakan's bandwidth, right? Very broad. And so I can win in that capacity and keeping the wine to the best of our ability at an affordable price allows a 25-year-old and a 65-year-old or 75-year-old who doesn't work anymore and is on retirement funds to still afford to drink the wine. I'm not saying I'm a generalist and Masakan is for everybody. I want it to be for everybody. I want everyone to enjoy it, but I do feel like I can span borders, generations from X, Y's, and Z's to boomers and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's because I'm triggering their mind and
Yeah.
some triggering something in them that brings them joy. And Masakan is a vehicle to bring them joy.
Dude, you're doing something though that's different and you are triggering people in their mind. And whether you admitted it right now, but it's so true. So many people are experiencing these things every single day. But when they read about it, they don't realize that what they're reading about is their life as well. And this whole broad spectrum, like you have tapped into this space that I don't think a lot of people are tapping into or they don't understand. And the crazy thing is, like I said, like the wine industry is a very longevity industry. And I don't say this out of disrespect, but you've not been in the wine industry as long as other people, but yet you're so advanced, dude. Like you're so far ahead and you're so broad. Like you're seeing so many different avenues. You have so many different ways that you're tapping into the mind, not just of yesterday's consumer or the current consumer, but tomorrow's consumer. Like that kind of brings me into my next topic. I want to talk about your NFT project. So NFTs are something that I can't even lie. I'm not going to sit here and make pretend that like I can have a full-blown conversation. I can sit in the room with you and we can talk about NFTs, but you've found a way to tap into another space. You've actually sold NFTs on OpenSea. What's cool is I go to the OpenSea app, and this is where you can check if you're listening and you don't know what OpenSea is. It's an app where you can view and purchase NFTs. When I go to OpenSea and I type in Massican, you pop up. And it's like you have an account, you have NFTs, you're there, you're present, like you're ready. And I can't think off the top of my head because I didn't try to do any of this crazy searching, but I can't think of anybody else that is doing this. But yet you are like, you go by like when we were talking earlier about your time in school, dude, you're so smart. You're such a genius in so many different ways, from your time in publishing to wine to figuring out different things and different methods and different ways to tap into people. And this is just one of those cool things. Like I have a little crypto. I'm not that familiar with the metaverse. I jumped on the sheep wagon. I got a little Doge. I'm watching my numbers on Coinbase, a little up, a little down. I don't actually own an NFT, but I'm thinking about getting me a Massican NFT. But just talk a little bit about your NFT project and what are your intentions when you're doing your NFT project? How are you trying to make an influence in a space that is not even crowded at all, but you're just trying to be the leader and the one that steps in and says, "Hey, we got something to say as well."
No, thank you. So I started my NFT journey before the pandemic, in essence, and not even an NFT journey. I started my blockchain journey, which I believe in blockchain as technology. I believe in it as software that allows for open transparency of information sharing,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe in that wholeheartedly. And I think the NFTs gave that whole industry a black eye because of just the kind of the rush to make money and to do these things that no one really knew what the at the end other end of it what exactly all about. But I started in 2018 thinking, listening, and potentially investing in two women who were starting a blockchain publishing company because, again, transparency, right? Like they publish a story and it's coded on the blockchain. It
Right.
is open and accessible and for fact checking and access to a number of people to make sure that this is actually true and accurate before you actually publish it. And that's how the blockchain works. There's these checks and balances. And so I was very interested in that, and that project never got off the ground, unfortunately. So I ended up thinking about. I saw what the team up in Canada did with CryptoKitties in 2018, and they tried to figure out how the housing market worked, and then they couldn't get the housing market onto the blockchain, so they tried to figure out how to create ownership through activity. Back to I think about it, and then I'm not a very religious person at all, but I think about it like back to the Garden of Eden, two people, and then all of a sudden and again, it's a mythical story and a biblical story, but what they did with CryptoKitties was take two cats that mated, and then they had a litter, and that litter had a litter and a litter and a litter, and then all of a sudden, now there's 20 million CryptoKitties that have been birthed through
Mm-hmm.
like an exchange in like a card game
Yeah.
that people played as a collectible card game, and there's 20 million of them, and they all go back to the origin too. There was like an
Yeah.
origin 100 or level 0, and it all stemmed from there. So like you have record of everything that ever happened from like who transacted with these kitties, these little cats. And it came out of like Reddit and cat memes, and everyone loves a good cat meme on social media. And it all came out of that. But they actually created a database and a ledger that went back to the origin. So like we can starting tomorrow, I think 40 years from now, every nut and bolt and screw and ball bearing that goes into a car or a computer or a chip or whatever is all going to be recorded on the blockchain, and it's all going to be a direct line. You'll have access to all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the record of useful things. And so I started looking at how does this work for someone like myself, other than and how I want to interact with my brand and how I want Masakan to come across in that market space. And I was telling the story to my partners at Gallo yesterday. I said, I started the NFT project at Masakan for a couple of reasons. I created an NFT early on, and I built the white wine emoji, and I made it as an NFT and all this other stuff, and that was
Mm-hmm.
fun. But what I did with my business was wine's a perishable item. So if it's hot out, we don't like to ship it. And if you order wine, and it's heavy, right? So it costs a lot of money to ship wine. So wine struggles with the Amazon effect. Everyone struggles with the Amazon effect, which is Amazon. You buy something, you get it the next day, and
Yeah.
everyone's. This is how internet
Everything should
shopping
be.
everything should be.
Yeah.
And wine can't do that, right? Because again, it's a perishable item that could boil in the back of a UPS truck, or it could freeze in the back of a FedEx truck, depending on the time of the year and all the other things. So you don't get wine the next day, like when you order it online. It's very rare unless you're willing to pay a lot of money and put wine on an airplane overnight to get it the next day. So it's like, how do I create the Amazon effect that's not that someone feels like when they purchase something and they gave me their money and they're not going to get it for 7 or 10 days, that they get something in return. So I created a collaboration series with an artist who was an NFT artist. And I said, hey, I want to give, when someone purchases a bottle of Massican on my website, I want to give them an NFT. I want to give them a piece of your art that is a digital collectible that they can have ownership to, that is connected to the Massican wines. And so so she created these amazing labels for me, and like representations of each of the wines.
Hmm.
And so what we did was we created a whole little, I turned it off this because we weren't really selling wine the last 2 months. I need to turn it back on. So thank you for reminding me. But if you go to my website, and in the future, when I turn this on, you buy a bottle of Massican, I will send you an email and say, hey, thanks again for the purchase. I really, truly appreciate it. We collaborated with an artist and we created this digital collectible that's in your dashboard. It's in your home, in Massican's website, like where your account lives. And if you go to it, you can link to it. You can actually click on the digital collectible, and it says, if you are crypto forward or crypto built blockchain forward, Web3
Hmm.
forward, and have a crypto digital wallet, you can mint this into your wallet. And so we created a whole minting section as well. So you click on it and mint it, and we can bring it over to your crypto wallet. And then it always resides in your account. So now, say you're not an NFT person, right? But people are at the dinner table and they're talking NFTs. You can be like, holy shit, I got an NFT from Mastercon. And now
Yeah.
you're part of the conversation. Every customer who's purchased a bottle of Ania Jamina Sauvignon and Hyde this year, from when we turned this thing on, has this digital collectible. Whether or not they've converted it into their digital wallet as an NFT, as a true NFT, is another thing. But in your account, you have these things, and you have an art gallery of the labels and the representations of the Massican labels that Amber, our artist, presented. So I used it as a utility thing, as a customer service thing,
Hmm.
as a gift, a free gift. I'm giving you
Yeah.
this free digital collectible as a thank you. I use it really to try to fill that void of 7 to 10 days before you get your wine.
Hmm.
And that was important to me because it's like, hit send, boom, there goes your money, and like silence
Yeah.
until the wine is packed and shipped. So that was really just trying to think about how to connect the dots between that Amazon and wine will never be Amazon. And
Yeah.
that's why Amazon doesn't sell wine. They've probably seen how ridiculously expensive it is because of how heavy it is and how perishable it is. So
Yeah.
unless they do it locally, if you with your Whole Foods. So if you have a Whole Foods that has Masakan, you can order Amazon online and then have Whole Foods deliver, and you can deliver in California a bottle of Masakan as long as if it's on the shelf. So that's pretty cool, but Amazon hasn't really taken it beyond that.
That's cool, man. I know you're big on the metaverse. You were talking about how you don't, obviously, I knew this, but you don't have your own winery. You ever going to build a winery in the metaverse?
Built a bar called Bar Masakan for the
Oh, cool. I
metaverse,
didn't know that.
and yeah, so I did do that as a project that I was really engaged with because for me, what I love, and I actually think we didn't launch it because there's really no one in the metaverse right now,
Yeah.
and but I think it's going to be a very useful tool in the future. And I think with the advancements we've gotten with AI just in the last year, when I think ChatGPT launched in this November, December of
Crazy.
2022. And so I built a bar, and it's basically an Italian bar. So it's something, again, it's a memory thing, right? You love going to a bar in France or Austria or Italy, and you go up to the bar, you order a little espresso or cappuccino, you drink it there, you leave 10, 20 cent euro tip, and you walk out, you get on your best when you go. And there's some people sitting at cafe tables eating a cornetto or a panini or drinking a Campari soda or a glass of wine. And it's like it's a European, Italian, Spanish, French, Austrian vibe.
Hmm.
So I built this architectural design for a bar, and it is so I have all the architectural kind of files, and I just need to then convert it into digital files for a space that belongs in the metaverse. And then with the AI movement, what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to take this podcast and all the other podcasts I've been on and take all the things written about Massican, all the reviews of Massican wines, all the things written about me, and put it into a big AI model. And then
Yeah.
I can create an AI version of myself. And not to be good, not as the bartender. And because what's interesting about the metaverse is it's open 365, 724. It doesn't care about holidays because Christmas holiday to you is not a Christmas holiday to me, or vice versa. So it's not just 9 to 5. It's 11 o'clock at night in some parts of the world, and someone wants to like go and escape to a metaverse, and I want someone there. I want to be there to just be welcoming, and I want to be
Yeah.
there to answer questions, and I want to be there to support their journey in wine. And so I think with an AI character, we can build, they'll replicate my voice. They'll know how I'll answer every question
Mhm.
because they built the model on the things I've said.
Yeah.
And then we can add in some little technical stuff, the history of making wine and all that stuff into the model so that I can answer questions that I wouldn't necessarily know how to answer. But that was it's a dream, it's a vision of mine. I think this is something that's not going to happen for another 5 years,
Yeah.
10 years. And the reason for that is if you just look at the statistics right now and who's playing Fortnite, who's playing Roblox, 55 million kids under the age of 18 are unique daily visitors. 55 daily visitors globally are on Roblox. It's 55 million people who are living in these kind of gaming metaverses and functional metaverses that Roblox considers themselves a metaverse. And it's not like you have to wear goggles and go somewhere. You're just engaging with a video screen like you would your computer monitor. And they're seeing themselves as a character in these spaces. So 10 years from now, when those kids are 28, do you think that they're still going to have this vision of how the world works? And then when they're 30 and have a lot of money, they're still going to have this vision of how the world works and how they want to spend their money. And they're going to, I personally, I play PGA Tour golf, and I buy better drivers and better golf balls and fancier golf shoes and polo shirts. I spend the money to buy these things for my character who's
Right.
living and playing and engaging in a gaming space. I'll be on a plane tomorrow. I'll be doing that for 4 hours, playing around a couple rounds of golf.
Yeah.
So I'm already doing that as a 50-year-old, and you have these 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are doing this, and it's we're doing it without knowing it. I just think that it was Mark Zuckerberg, probably the loneliest person in the metaverse. I think he fucked up by presenting it so poorly to the world,
Yeah.
and I think everyone got caught up in the concept of it. But like the last 5 years have been crazy, man. I mean, like if you look at earnings calls in the third quarter of 2020, everyone was talking about crypto. Then
Hmm.
earnings calls in the third quarter of 2021, everyone was talking about NFT utility. Third quarter 2022, everyone's talking about the metaverse. Third quarter 2023, everyone's talking about AI. So like the companies are just doing this massive swing back
Totally.
and forth because no one's been able to figure it out yet. And I think they just have been following some of these kind of unfortunate trends and poor marketing of some of these projects that have started. I love all of it. Don't get me wrong. I learned from a lot of it, but I just think it's from the 99% of the consumers who don't know what the fuck we're talking about when we say
Yeah.
blockchain, crypto, NFTs, or metaverses. We have to have a better communication strategy.
Dan, I appreciate you sharing all that. I want to learn more about NFTs, and I want to learn more about all these different things that you were discussing. I'm not the guy that's going to be the smartest one in the room with that. You clearly are. And I think it's cool. I didn't even know you built the bar. So that's really cool. And I think, like you said, 5 years from now, we'll start to see a shift in that and a lot more activity. I have a few more questions. I definitely want to
Yeah.
respect your time today. So I'm just going to briefly touch on them. The first one's about climate change. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but you're really big into climate change. So, two questions with climate change. One, what can people do immediately right now to help with climate change? Because I think you're a big advocate on we can talk about it. We can say we want to do this. We can say we want to do that. But there's got to be specific things that you do. So taking an active role and making a decision, not just in the wine industry, you can answer on the behalf of the wine industry. What would something that somebody could do immediately? And believe it or not, like I look at this vintage, 2023 is being described as one of the best vintages. I was at a lunch with a winemaker out of Paso yesterday. He's visiting Florida. he described this vintage as one of the best, if not the best vintages he's ever seen or been a part of. Is it strange for me to think that climate change or climate control had something to do maybe with the fact that the vintage was so different? But when you think about this vintage, it's an old school vintage, right? The pick is more on time than what we've been used to. The color of the fruit's been great. The hang time has been just insane. The large amount of fruit, the quantity. Is it weird for me to assume that climate change had anything to do with that, or did we just get lucky with a really good vintage? So just really briefly, talk about climate change, anything that anybody can do immediately, and also this vintage in particular.
For sure. No, I agree. It's a great vintage across the board for white and red wine producers. I think we keep talking about change, and it's an evolution of what's happening in the change. It's slow. It's like boiling the frog with regards to we're living through it. We see some extremes. We see this pendulum swing of extremes, and sometimes it takes 3 or 4 years to swing one way and then swing a couple of years to come back. And I think the last 6 years, I always say since 2013 is when we've really seen the slings and arrows of these extreme conditions in California, and things have intensified and heated up. But this year feels like pre-2013. It feels like 2006. It feels like 2010, maybe 2012. It feels like the good old days, right? And
Totally.
that's not, let's not get fooled, right? But by this, it's going to be like this all the time. It's just going to offer us another challenge as as you open a door in progress and moving forward in evolution. And so I don't blame climate change. I don't think we have to blame it. I don't think we have to be afraid of it. I think we have to adapt to it, evolve to it. What I hope from my peers in the wine space, and I work on 2 boards as a director
Yeah.
for grape growers in Napa Valley, and a certified sustainable wine growing program called Napa Green. What I say is a vine lives half of its life is underground, the other half of its life is above ground. What can we control? We can control what we put in the soils and what we put on the vine above ground. So my hope is that let's give the vine the most resistance to Mother Nature, which we can control. And the best way to do that is to have healthy soils, to feed the ground and ground, your dirt, and the vines you've planted in it with the healthiest products that you can possibly give it, to give them the longest and most generative life, and allows them to be, to be strengthened up so that when they are hit with extremes, whether it be heat or rain or hail or whatnot, the vine will rebound and bounce back and be resilient to it as much as possible. So
Mhm.
that's the one thing I can ask of the wine industry, is just be kind to your soils, be good to your soils,
It's great.
take a step further than sustainability, try to spend some money in the soils. The money you spend farming your vineyards will pay out if your vines last 3, 5, 7, 10 years longer than they historically have. You can extend the vine's life at a high quality level of great production. That your extra 10 or 15% farming costs this year are going to be doubled and tripled and quadrupled just because of the length and duration of return on investment. So that's what I ask. From a personal perspective, as a winemaker, I've made the choice, and thanks to my partners, to do something that everyone's talking about right now, is to reduce the size of the glass consumption in the bottle itself and the packaging of the wine itself. Packaging between the glass, the cork, the capsule, and the label and the box is about a third, up to a third, somewhere between 28 and 32% of the actual carbon footprint. The glass itself takes a lot of energy, literally a
Yeah.
little energy to convert sand into glass, and or even to recycle glass and to burn it, melt it, and restart over. So I am with my partners and some of their businesses like Gallo Glass, which is the largest consumer of recycled glass in California. We're moving Massican in our first vintage together to a lighter weight bottle of glass. It's going to be over 110 grams lighter. What that equates to on the scale of 10,000 cases of wine is a reduction of 30,000 pounds of glass
Wow.
and over 11 tons of carbon. And that's just a step I can take personally to move and hopefully be a leadership step that other people start to follow. People are doing this. I'm not the first, I'm not the only, but we have to do this in a large, the entire industry has to get behind the understanding of how our wines impact the world around us and our ecosystem. And as we're growing grapes, let's be as honest and transparent with our vines by giving them the best food and fertilizer and material within the soils that will help them be resilient in climate change. Let us make decisions from a packaging perspective that are not wasteful, that
Yeah.
are not high energy, and then let consumers support that and let consumers yell at us and tell us they want us to be better at what we do. And respect the consumer for that and tell them that, yes, they're right. We are all in this together. And thank you for supporting
Mhm.
our efforts, and we will keep pushing. So it's a problem that we as a sometimes it's really difficult to react to the mass amount of Mother Nature and this climate change and all the things around us because we're still struggling to run so many aspects of a singular business, right? Wine is agriculture, it's manufacturing, it's sales, it's marketing, it's hospitality, it's all these things. And so a small family winery that is trying to put wine on the table and in tasting rooms and in people's mailboxes, there's a lot of things you have to think about on a daily basis to keep it
Mhm.
moving. And sometimes a existential threat that is 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 years away isn't necessarily top of mind. But if you love wine, you think about it as generational, you think about it as handing it off to the next generation, whether in your own family or the evolution of the brand. And that means you have to be thinking about climate.
Dude, the way you answered that, for anybody that's listening that's in the wine industry, huge benefit. Like it almost reminded me metaphorically of this pitcher that threw the perfect strike and that sound that you hear when it hits the glove. You were spot on with that, man. It was just refreshing. Some of the things that you're doing to make a change or to stand and do your part, I think that was a huge response. And I know a lot of people are going to be taking into account what you said to personally make those decisions as well. 2017, San Francisco Chronicle named you Winemaker of the Year. Don't be bashful. Sometimes I'll interview somebody and they've received an award like this and they try to blow it off. Dude, you very much deserve that. You deserve so much more than that. Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast have put your wines in the top 100 numerous times. But what did that mean to you? What did it mean to get that award, Winemaker of the Year? That's a pretty big deal. And also, what does it mean to be recognized with your wines with Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast, and other publications?
It's a great joy. I always say it's really nice coming from an athletic background. It's really nice to be MVP once. It's pretty amazing to just do it once or win the Super
Yeah,
Bowl once or
that's
whatever.
cool.
So I feel like it gave me the ability to take risks because I felt like people then were looking at me maybe in a different way or trusted me in a different way or respected me in a different way
Mhm.
or hated me in a different way. It doesn't matter. There's obviously a lot of bad actors in this world, but it gave me the ability to take risks and to see that risk get rewarded. And I can only ask people to take away from that too is yeah, it's a risk to just to be a Tokai Friulano and Ribolla Giallo winemaker in Napa Valley, and like, but it's a risk that's paid off. And I think it got recognized and then it got paid off. So I just hope that it brings people inspiration, allows people the opportunity to take a risk. And if you're not married, you don't have kids and you have a little bit of savings, and you hate your fucking job,
Yeah.
take a risk.
Yeah.
You're going to live another 40 years. The wine industry, moving into the wine industry made me feel like I was 21 again. It was like I had no clue what I was doing. I just finished college and I'm it just gave me so much youthful energy to start over again, the learning process and the work process. And I really did feel like I was 21 again. And I think what I was able to accomplish hopefully inspires other people. And the best part about it is like it inspired you to reach out.
Man.
And I think anyone who reaches out to me, I try and in my best ability to respond and be accessible to people. It's a little hard sometimes. We had
Yeah.
to cancel our talk last week because of was a little overwhelmed with finishing up harvest and stuff.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, it afforded me a lot of opportunity to continue to try new things. And I think it pissed some people off because I tend to be a bit of a rogue agent in the wine space when I'm talking about things like climate change a lot. And I had to put my money where my mouth was. I had to make the decision to try to work with my farmers to get them to be healthier stewards of the soil. And these are things that I'm not perfect and the industry's not perfect, but I think there's a general awareness that's going to help us be perfect. And whatever I've accomplished allows me a voice in the space and I'm going to use it to make sure that we do better every day. So that's how I look at the having won the Super Bowl with the Chronicle award and being on the top 100 list. It's really on. It's truly. I'm like, wow, it's pretty fun, crazy.
Dude, another cool kind of crazy thing, another Super Bowl for you. Recently, Ian J. Gallo acquired Massican. And I remember seeing that pop up. It wasn't even you that talked about it. I saw it somewhere else, and I immediately read the article, and then I went over and I shared my love and respect to you for that. But you still get to be the winemaker. Massican is still Massican, but now you have the support and the resources from Gallo. So just talk about that, because that recently happened, and I know that was super cool for you.
Oh, it's a dream come true. My goal with Masakan when I took it on full time with no day job. I left my ranks at Larkmead and I took Masakan on full time to grow the brand, to scale the brand, to put more bottles on tables, to tell more stories, to get more people engaged with this style of wine that is the essence and ethos of Masakan, this lighter, brighter, fresher style of wines that remind people of Mediterranean white wines.
Mhm.
So my goal was focus, focus. Let's grow this brand, have a larger footprint of farmers, make more wine, grow a bigger network of distribution and sales, be on more tables, whether it be at restaurants or at homes, lower my prices to the best of my ability. All these things were in my vision and my focus. And then I met Joe Gallo and he supported it. He was like, I love what you're doing. I want you to succeed. I want you to win. And then he came back and he said, how can I help you do all the things you want to do? And I said, I don't know what that means. And he was like, yeah, if I help you, it's going to look this way. Like we'll acquire Masakan, but we won't do it without you. We'll ask you to be exclusive with us to help bring your vision to life. We can provide you with the network and logistics of finding more grapes in California and the network and logistics of finding more distribution partners and more tables nationwide. And we can do all these things and we can do it. We can allow you to control the quality and control the volume. And as long as we hit certain targets, the brand will continue to succeed within our portfolio and we'll give you the keys to keep driving the car.
Yeah.
And now with the family Gallo behind me, it's a really nice fucking car, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's the best car in the business. But it's still honestly, it happened this summer, and as we headed into harvest, I was really focused on harvest and really focused on helping with the transition team to get all the little nuts and bolts. You do something by yourself for 15 years, and then you hand it off to somebody to ask that wants to support you. And it's a lot. There's a lot of Dropbox folders.
Mhm.
There's a lot of files. There's a lot of licenses, a lot of permits, a lot of customer relationships, a lot of nuances, a lot of things that have to not fall between the cracks. So it's been a little bit of an overwhelming last couple of months. It hasn't really sunk in yet, but I will say I've had nothing but a great experience, and I met nothing but amazing human beings at the Gallo family and the team of people I've been working with, and they're
Yeah.
all so fired up to help bring Masakan, the dream of Masakan, to more people and more tables, and I couldn't be more excited about the future and the opportunity, and it's like the largest wine company in the United States, possibly in the world,
Yeah.
buys the smallest wine company in Napa that doesn't make Cabernet.
Dude, the first
It's being
exclusive white wine brand. You're their first exclusive white wine brand. And dude, that what's funny is you said you traded in the car. I was thinking like the Vespa, like you traded in the Vespa for it's
for the
like
Ferrari, yeah.
something Italian. Dan, where can people learn more about you? I know that everything I was checking out, social media, website, and all that is super exciting. How can they learn more about you through all of those avenues, also through your magazine, NFT project, if people don't know about OpenSea? So why don't you go ahead and share that?
If anyone's in my networks and on the social side, I apologize during harvest. It's too busy to be very active, but I'll be, now that harvest is cooling down, I'll be a little bit more active in the DMs and on all platforms. I really love things like LinkedIn. I love Instagram. I love TikTok. I don't get on TikTok as much as I'd like because I'll just spend the day there because it brings me so much joy to see those creators do really fun and interesting shit. So all of those platforms are available. I still, part of the commitment and partnership and relationship with Gallo is that I can still have creative control over things, still be the face and the voice and the communicator with consumers. So anyone could find me at any time, emails, text messages, all that things, website, social.
Yeah.
I'm there. I want to be present. I think wine is about sharing, and it's not only about sharing information and education, it's about sharing joy, and it's about lifting each other up and educating in a way to build confidence and trust so that you feel confident as a wine drinker
Mhm.
and you're not scared when you see a wall of wine at different prices or a list at a restaurant with different prices. I'm there to hold your hand. I do this with people have done this with me, so I'm there to do it with them. I've literally FaceTimed, looked at wine lists in restaurants across the country for people
That's
and said,
cool.
buy that wine because I know how intimidating it is. And so you can find me anywhere, whether in the Massican universe or massican.com or, on social,
Well,
mostly on Instagram, my personal account.
I'm going to link all of that in the show notes. In fact, I'm going to link the magazine. I'm going to link the NFT. I'm going to put so many different ways that people can just easily click and they can get connected to you. You're a very touchable guy. And this interview today has been incredible. I do have one last question before we close up. If you think about the newer people in the industry, there's always people that are looking up to you, or you were looking up to somebody at one point. What would you say, being a guy that thinks outside the box? Because I think you have something, I think you can give really good, solid advice to somebody. What would you say is one of the biggest advantages right now that somebody can literally take a hold of and focus on right now in the wine industry if they want to be successful? And if that's not something that is not outside the box, what would that thing be that needs to be focused on and paid attention to be successful?
I If I had to do it all over again, which is the path I was going down to start with in wine, I tell everybody, whether you're a sommelier or a sales rep at a distributor or someone who works in a cellar, but that might not be their last gig in the
Mhm.
industry, or someone who sells wine through e-commerce for a winery or wine shop, whatever. I tell everybody the fastest path, the easiest road to a potential success in wine is speak another language. And speak Spanish, speak Italian, speak French, speak German, because we have these amazing importers and distributors of all these wines. And we have all these great stories and relationships that get lost in translation from small family farmers who are making great wines in Germany or Italy or France. And no, the guy or gal behind the phone doesn't speak the language, is not going to have not going to be able to translate the story effectively. If you're fluent in one or two languages, three languages other than your main language, you will get a job with a distributor overnight. If you show interest in wine or have any aptitude for wine, and you can look at those brand ambassador jobs and be the conduit from and the storyteller and the logistics person who helps get the wine from point A to point B, but can do it in the native language and native tongue. And I think that is something I've always said I regret. I would have done that after my time in Italy, come over and tried to be an Italian brand ambassador and went down that pathway. If I could do that
Mhm.
all over again, that's the way I was doing it then. I wouldn't have changed anything. I didn't know I was going to be a winemaker. That's it. It's like wine, like fashion, like publishing, journalism, all those things. It's not a lucrative business. You're not going to make tons and tons of money. You do it because you live above your pay grade. You eat well, drink well, share with friends, and that's what I mean by saying living above your pay grade. We're all in this together, and we all share very well.
Yeah,
I think we can have deeper conversations about this, but yeah, if you know another language, you got a leg up in the industry, I think. Depending on
that's
what
great.
side of the business you want to be on, for sure.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And that's that outside of box thinking that I was talking about. Like when you said that, at first I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. But then I thought about how you can create those really good relationships with people. Like it can be intimidating if somebody has an Italian portfolio and they're fluent in Italian. I'm going to miss that opportunity if I'm trying to work with them and build a relationship with them. And those wines may be the wines that I know are going to speak for me, whether it's for a restaurant menu. Maybe I want to add some wines to my personal portfolio. Maybe I want to refer some wines to a friend. And so I think that's huge, man. And Dan, I want to say, man, I am I'm speechless today. Like getting to sit and hang out with you and talk with you. You made that time for me. And dude, you're a big inspiration. All the things that you've done in the wine industry, before the wine industry, the places that you've been, the people that you've touched. I know that the people that have listened today are going to get a different podcast because there's so many different ways that you have tapped into the market, and they're just going to be fascinated and overwhelmed. And to have you on the show today, like I really meant it in the beginning when I said I crossed my fingers, because you're one of those guys, man. If I can have that chance to sit down and chat, it's going to mean the world to me. And so I want to thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting, and I look forward to raising a glass with you in person at some point in the very, very near future.